overall, how did we get to where we are right now with this invasion and at the scale that we're seeing it at?
Well, it developed since, I would say, the breakdown of the USSR into 15 independent countries, which prior to 92, very end of 91, were parts of the Russian Empire and then parts of the Soviet Union, or Union of Soviet Social, because USSR was Union of Soviet Republics, and Soviet Union was a union of 15 national ethnic-based republics. Ukraine, second largest after Russian Republic. And then there were 13 others like Georgia, Armenia, Uzbekistan, and others. And of course, with the fall of communist economic system at the end of the 90s, the Soviet Union dissolved itself peacefully into 15 independent states. Ukraine was one of them. Russia, the largest, was the other. And Russia and Ukraine were always very close. Of course, throughout hundreds of years of the Russian Empire, there was no Ukrainian republic. It was just a province. And the Russian Empire was just one country, like United States, 50 states, it was the same. In the Soviet system, from 1917 to 1992, communist leaders decided to make 15 republics out of provinces of Russia, which meant very little because no one was thinking at that time about breakdown of the country. But in 1992, so 30 years ago, along with the breakdown of communist economic system, those constituent republics decided to split into 15 independent states, and Ukraine was one. But ethnically and historically, Ukraine is very close to Russia. And that was the reason nominally for Putin to claim all along that Ukraine is not really an independent country. It was always part of Russia. That was true, but in the last 30 years, Ukrainians only became much more independent than nominally they became in 92. And the last 20 years were very dramatic, or 15 years of Russian-Ukrainian relations, because Ukrainians in 2014 decided that they want to go more with Europe than with Russia. And they, most of the people, wanted Ukraine to sign an agreement with Western Europe, with the European Union, trade agreement, which the president of Ukraine at that time promised to sign. But Russia saw it as a bad move. Ukrainians separating themselves even further and no more being under the influence of Moscow. Putin pressured the president to sign another agreement with Russia, trade agreement. So it was ironically over trade and economic relations. The president of Ukraine at that time wanted to go with Russia, but people protested. Young students hit the streets of Kiev, capital of Ukraine, which is a big city, like 3 million people, the size of maybe Chicago, if you want the capital. And the protest led to the president running away from Ukrainian president, to Russia, new elections, new president. But then Putin decided that as a sort of revenge to take Crimean Peninsula, a part of Ukraine. It was peaceful because most Ukrainians were Russian speakers and most of them did want to join with Russia. Legally, it was definitely against all laws, international agreements, but de facto, it was not a big thing. No one, almost no casualties, just peaceful with the help of Russian military, of course. But much more bloody was the conflict in East Ukraine, same year, 2014, and then 2015. Pro-Russian Ukrainian citizens decided they want to join Russia, and a province of Ukraine, size of Connecticut, was taken over by those rebels. Ukrainian army counterattacked, but could only free 1/2 of the provinces that rebelled against Ukraine. Russia helped those rebels, and that's what brought us to today's situation. 3 days ago, Putin recognized those rebel areas of Ukraine, again, about size of New Jersey, as independent states. And there are 2 of them, which were just provinces of Ukraine, but yes, populated by mostly Russian-speaking and pro-Russian people, ordinary people, with population of about 3.5 million in these 2 areas. So for the last 8 years, since 2014 to 3 days ago, there was a cold peace between Ukraine and this separatist area, which was about 10% of the territory of Ukraine. Ukraine itself is the size of Texas, just to give you some idea. So imagine a part of Texas, 10% of Texas decided to go with join Mexico. And then Texas counterattacks, but Mexico's country helped those separatists to hold to these lands. And then after 8 years, recognized those 2 provinces as independent countries. That's what Putin did 3 days ago. And that was the beginning of this very tragic, very unexpected to most people development, because not only did he recognize it, which that I, for one, expected that will happen, and brought military forces to this breakaway areas of Ukraine, now formerly independent countries, but he also decided to help those separatist newly recognized countries to extend their territory, to take over neighboring regions, districts, size of New Jersey. So imagine Connecticut decided now to merge forcefully state of New Jersey, which now, of course, in Ukraine, it was under the control of the Ukrainians. But that still would not be the least bad situation if, because it's not a very important area. It used to be a big coal mining part of the Soviet economy, and but for all practical reasons, even in this rebel territory, life was very unhappy economically. Half of the people, younger people, educated people, left either for Ukraine or for Russia, and these other neighboring districts were also not in very good shape. But it turns out that 2 days after recognizing those republics, yes, Putin decided to go wider in the military campaign, and declared just 1 day ago, well, actually today, 24th of February, declared the he declared special operation, not the war on Ukraine, no. Officially, it was called special operation in Donbass. Donbass is this rebel controlled or disputed area. But
your video just went out.
Let me see. Okay, video. Yes, is it back?
Yep, you're back.
So what then happened in the last 24 hours? On top of expanding this territory that's already controlled for 8 years, so going with ground attack against neighboring districts. A dozen or so cities of Ukraine proper was bombed or underwent missile attacks. And it is true, as Russian military authorities are saying, that population centers were not targeted. What they did target were military installations, military airports, storage facilities for military material, and government offices and buildings, including Kiev, the capital, the second largest city, Kharkiv, which is size of Louisville, or maybe Cincinnati, population-wise, 1.5 million, and then third, fourth largest cities, all about 1 million or so. Outskirts of those cities were attacked, and there's military facilities and government facilities, but also even in the west of the country, and Ukraine, again, is the size of Texas, so it's a sizable country, but Russia has total superiority in the air. Russian Air Force is much more powerful, and missile technology is used, so Russian military is fairly advanced. And I was a captain in reserve in the Russian army, so, but I can tell you that I'm not proud at all of what's going on now with what Russia is doing. And it's not a Russian war. I want to say it's a Putin's war. It's not a Russian war, because Russian people have very little say over developments like that. And it's tragic. It's of course on the human side of that, because people are dying already. Ukrainian soldiers, civilians, and Russian soldiers, of course, too. But economically, it's a disaster already. And for Ukraine, of course, but for Russia too. Russian currency, ruble, of course, I teach economics, so I follow what's going on with the economic side of things. And even before sanctions that are being imposed on Russia, you have Russian currency, ruble, losing like 10% of its value. Russian stock market dropping 30% in just one day, and that's after 20% or so drop before. So essentially, the value of all Russian assets is now like 1/2 of what it was just a week ago. So my hope is that Putin will stop sooner rather than later and declare victory without going all the way into occupation or blockading the major cities with ground forces. But that's just my hope. Now a lot depends upon the situation on the ground. What will Ukrainian forces do in terms of the pushback, in terms of their counter attacks, and will they be able to stop the advance? But Putin is, of course, to make a decision. And again, I hope that he will not go all the way, because it will be extremely bloody, extremely costly, and with terrible consequences for both Russia and Ukraine, and a bad impact on the global economy and inflation. And even here in the US, it will be felt in terms of economic impact.